I think we'll begin. Those who don't know me, I'm Mordechai Becher. Thank you very much. Mordechai Becher of the Gateways organisation. We've been working with Torah Links for years, and one of the things we do is we run these weekend seminars at hotels. There's many people who've been to them here, and we're having one coming up I think it's the 24th, 25th, right? 24th, 25th, there's a number of people from here going, and you've heard myself, Rabbi Rietti, Dr. Presby, Mrs. Greenblatt, etc., our regular lecturers, and it'll be a very nice Doubletree Hotel in Somerset, New Jersey, which I don't think is very far from here. Is it?
60 miles. 60 miles.
Oh, that's nothing. Okay, so 50, 60 miles. I just got back from Calgary on Tuesday, so that was that's a 4.5 hour flight. Yeah, it looks 60 miles, big deal. Right. So, but anyway, I encourage you to speak to Rabbi Serebrowski and Miller about coming, and I hope to see you there. And okay, that's it. So we covered 2 weeks ago. We spoke about the Italian Jews. The Jews of Italy. We spoke about the community in Italy, the history and the background and the unique customs and the unique authors and scholars of that community. Last week we spoke about the life and struggles and legacy of the Ramchal, Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzato, the great Jewish philosopher and mystic. And tonight I'd like to talk about some of his ideas. Some of the ideas of Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzato. These are mostly based on 2 books. He wrote, as we discussed last week, literally hundreds of books. We don't have all of them, but we have at least 30 books that he wrote, each one a masterpiece, some of them in areas of Kabbalah, some of them in areas of commentary, most of them Kabbalah, mysticism. And many of them, and written in beautiful, clear Hebrew, and many of them a dialogue format, a dialogue between the soul and the intellect, a dialogue between the intellectual and the mystic, the choker umukubal. Some of them are written in the form of a guide of how to make progress from just being careful not to do wrong things, going up the ladder all the way to the level of divine inspiration. Mesilat Yesharim, the path of the just. There's one, Derech Hashem, where a step-by-step development of Jewish ideas from basic axioms, which he develops really all of Judaism from certain basic axioms. Da'at Tvunot, the understanding heart, which again is the dialogue between the neshama, the soul, and the seichel. So I want to start with a conversation in this book, Da'at Tvunot, Chelek Beit, the second portion. And to understand it, what he starts off by saying is this: the soul asks the intellect. It says, I would like to know, the first question it asks is, Ma ani? What am I? I'd like to know, what am I? It's a great, that's how to, if you want to develop in life knowledge of the self, knowledge of why we're here. So he says, let me start by explaining that you, the intellect says, you, the soul, have been placed in this world for one reason alone, which is to exercise your bechira, your free will, to exercise your free will in order to develop yourself and to create a relationship between yourself and the Creator and God, and to go back to that original source, the origin of where you're from. So central to the way the Ramchal looks at the world is this idea of free will. However, we normally understand free will in a very limited way. How do we understand free will? I can choose between A, B, and C. I choose B, I choose A, I choose C. I'm confronted with a situation, a moral dilemma. So I make a choice. Do I do this? Do I not do that? That's, it's free will, very limited. It's like we think of it in the sense of it's chocolate or vanilla. Do I want chocolate or vanilla? Do I want to steal, not steal? Do I want to shirk my duty or fulfill my duty? Am I going to keep my mouth shut or am I going to say something stupid? And that's where free will is normally understood. But the words of Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzato tell us something a little different. He says the following. He says, if you really want to understand who you are, the intellect tells the soul, then the first thing you have to investigate is what's your purpose and your obligation in this world. And from an understanding of your purpose and your obligation, you'll understand a little bit better who you are. So he says this. He says, what has been given, you have been created as a being with free will. With free will. And this is something unique to you. There are no other creatures with free will. Angels, spiritual beings, don't have free will because they are pure intellects. So therefore they have there's nothing cloudy. There's no doubt. They have no free will. Animals, completely physical, also have no free will. When they appear to have free will, they can choose right, left, eat, don't eat, run, fight or flee, etc. But those are instinctive decision-making processes. They're not processes which are based on a moral evaluation. They're not processes which are based on... They don't go against their instinct. Social scientists will tell us that the environment has a huge impact. Geneticists tell us that DNA has a major impact. And it's true, these things certainly have an impact and an influence on our free will. But they don't eliminate it. You could say, maybe you could look at a group of individuals who were brought up in southern Newark, New Jersey, or in Camden or something like that. And you could probably say this group of individuals, probably most of them will end up on drugs, selling drugs, in prison. And that's probably, unfortunately, tragically, that's very true. The environment has a huge impact. However, there'll be a significant amount of them. There'll certainly be some of them who don't end up that way, who have gone against their environment, their conditioning, their upbringing, their education, etc. You'll have someone who'll become Cory Booker, a great person, fantastic guy, mayor of Newark, who came from an environment like that, but who rose beyond that. You could have someone born as a crack baby, addicted to crack from birth, Oprah Winfrey. You can change from where you were. So there's no question, at least from our perspective, that's the uniqueness of the human being. And that's really what life is. It's actually interesting. The Gemara says that you can tell if a bird slams into the water, and you want to know if this bird, maybe shall I go into the water and get the bird, maybe shecht it, so I'll have a meal. Okay, so so I want to know, is the bird treif? Is the bird treif? Treif is misused. Treif doesn't mean not kosher. Treif is a very specific type of non-kosher. Treif means a kosher animal which has a fatal injury, sickness, or has some type of deformation. That's what treif means. So we use it as a generic term to mean something non-kosher. Technically speaking, a pig is not treif. It's tameh, impure, not treif. Only a kosher animal can be treif. Does that make sense? Only a kosher animal can be treif, because treif is the term that means a kosher animal with this type of injury. So I want to know if this bird that's slammed into the water is kosher or not, or treif. So how do I know? The Talmud says, if it swims faster than the current, across the current, or against the current, then it's kosher. If it flows with the current, you can assume that it's probably had a fatal injury. So symbolically, that's a technical law in the laws of kashrut, but symbolically it tells me something quite beautiful, which is that only if it's only really living if it's going faster than the current, across the current, or against the current. If it's just sitting there flowing with the current, it's not really alive. Don't even bother getting it, because when you shecht it, you'll find out that it's been injured and you won't be able to eat it anyway. But again, it symbolizes this idea of free will as the essence of the human being. And Maimonides says this as well in Guide for the Perplexed. When it says in the Torah that we were created in the image of God, what that means is, just as God is unbound, unfettered, There is no outside influence. There is nothing that forces him to do what he does. He chooses to do so, and he does it. The human being is created with the same capacity of free will. Same capacity of free will. So, certainly, that's what he says. Free will, very central. However, still, he hasn't got to the clincher here, because we could still, when you look at it this way, you could still understand free will as just the choice between A and B. But he goes on further. He says, it has been given to that being, you, the soul, the obligation, the task, that during the short days that we have been given in this world, in this temporary world, to acquire the eternal world in that short time in which we're in the temporary world. And ta'anug olami, the eternal pleasure of a relationship with God that we will attain by our actions here. Which, he says, is not in the hand of any other creature to do. And he says, therefore, all other creatures, and not only all other creatures, but all of creation, is beneath your rule, that it will follow what you do. And here is where he adds an important element to the idea of free will. It is not merely a choice between a number of options. He says free will is actually, we create our environment, we create our world, we create our reality by our choices. So it's not just that I'm choosing between A, B and C. My choice creates A, B, C, D, etc. And my further choice of choosing A or B will actually will create, right, E, F, G, etc., and so on and so forth. And the entire world follows the free will choice and is under the rule of the free will choice of the human being. That is why, when it says in the Torah that we are created in the image of God, as you know, there's many different names of God. Over 70, 72. Many different names of God. The name of God that is chosen, it says when Tselem Elokim Barat Adam, we are created in the image of Elokim. Elokim, that name of God, Elohim, actually is understood as the same name of God that's used in creation. Bereshit, bara Elohim et hashemayim et haaretz. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. That's the name, Elohim, is used. And then later on, when it says the human was created in the image of, same name of God. What is that telling me? What that tells me is that the creation of the human being, God created a creator. He created we're the creators. We are the creators. And he goes on to say that, that he says there's two directions in which things come into this world. There's two directions in which the energy flow occurs. He says there's what he calls from heaven down. From heaven down, that means things which God enacts and does in this world. I don't know, weather, nature, etc. That's what he calls tiviyim, hechrechiyim, natural things that happen beyond our choice. That is to say, it comes from heaven down. He says there's another type of energy flow, which is the opposite. It's from here going up. It is what we create and what we do and what we initiate that actually goes up. He says, which comes first? Like the chicken or the egg. In other words, is it God's energy that he projects downwards, his decrees, his enactments, his decisions, his influence? Is that the beginning? Or does it start with what the human being does? So Ramchal says it starts from here. It doesn't start up there. God, in a sense, reacts, not in a sense, God reacts to what we do. God waits for us to initiate, and then he reacts to it. This is alluded to in last week's Torah reading. Last week's Torah reading, the very famous dream of Yaakov. Jacob dreams of a ladder connecting heaven and earth. On the ladder, there are angels. Did we discuss this last week? I don't remember. Right? There are angels going up and down the ladder. Olim v'yordimo. And all the commentaries are bothered by the fact that, what do you mean? They're going up and down. Angels should be going down and then up. If you're dreaming of a ladder connecting heaven and earth, and angels, if you're dreaming, then you should be, I guess, especially if Jacob is having a prophetic image, he should be seeing angels going down first and then up. down, and then up. Rashi's explanation, very famously, is that since he was leaving Israel, the angels the Israeli angels that were accompanying him, they left him. And he's now got the angels of the diaspora accompanying him. So that's why the angels are going up and then down. Later on, when he goes from Syria back to Israel, he also encounters, it says, 2 camps of angels. And it's the same thing. The angels of the diaspora leave him because he's on the way to Israel. He now gets the angels of the land of Israel that accompany him. Okay, that's Rashi's explanation. Maharal asks the question, right? Maharal asks, but he hasn't left Israel yet. He's in Jerusalem when he has the dream. Jerusalem is in the middle of Israel, right? Well, except according to the U.S. State Department and others. But my children who were born in Jerusalem registered as U.S. citizens were not born in Israel. U.S. State Department and the embassy refused to write Jerusalem, Israel. They said you can either write Israel or you can write Jerusalem. You can't have both. Okay. So anyway, so what happens is the angels of Israel. So he says that he hasn't left Israel yet. He's in Jerusalem still. He hasn't not even Ben Gurion Airport. So what's going on? So the Maharal answers very beautifully. He says because your spiritual level is determined by where you're headed, not by where you are. If he's headed out of Israel, he already loses the Israeli angels. He gets diaspora angels. If he's in diaspora, if he's headed to Israel, he already, once he's headed in that direction, he already gets the Israeli angels, and the diaspora angels leave him. It's not, it's put into physics, it's the vector, not the scalar. Yeah.
If he had his choice, wouldn't he not want to be abandoned by angels so that the diaspora angels would come down and then the Israeli angels would leave?
Yeah, it's a good question. But I don't know. I guess the influence still remains with him. It's a good question. But the point is that the angels going up and down seems like a strange thing, and that's how Rashi addresses it. However, others like the Ramchal and Rabbi Chaim Volozhin of the more Kabbalistic bent, they see it very differently. In fact, what do they see in this vision of the angels going up and down? They see those 2 energies that I spoke about. That's what he sees there. Where do they start? They don't start up there. The angels start here. We create them. We create the message, we create the energy, we create the either positive or, God forbid, the opposite. And then that goes up the ladder connecting heaven and earth. And in response to the angel, to the energy, to the message that we create, so that comes down the ladder is what we... Does that make sense? That's how the Ramchal puts it. And that's why the Talmud says that all the rewards and punishments of God are all midah keneged midah. That means they're all, the punishment exactly parallels or mirrors the crime. The reward parallels the action. Now, some would say, well, the reason for that is educationally. You know, it's like illogical consequences when you're educating a child. But that's not the explanation, because we find that this type of thing applies even when someone's dying. They have the midah keneged midah. And so what's the answer? According to Ramchal, the answer is very simple. The reason the crime is a reflection of the punishment is because it is the punishment rather is the crime just coming back down the ladder. You know, in other words, he did this action and he sends that type of energy. And that negativity, that impurity, so to speak, then the reaction is the same thing that comes down. So, of course, his punishment will be, because he's been punishing by his own actions. And the reward also will be the same thing. So so the human being ultimately is the creator. And we see in a shockingly anthropomorphic vision, the prophet Ezekiel has the famous vision of the divine chariot, which we have no understand. I mean, there's a lot of the deepest parts of the Kabbalah are about that, and there's no way we understand it. But there is one interesting point there, which Rabbi Chaim Volozhin extracts from that whole vision of the divine chariot. And the point is this: Ezekiel, it says, Al Hakisei, on the throne of God, Dmut Adam. That means the appearance of a person. Appearance of a person. And that's shocking. What does that mean? So Rabbi Chaim Volozhin says, he says, on the throne of God is actually humanity. It's not a person. It's humanity sits on the throne of God. He put us, so to speak, on his throne. And so therefore the human being, the whole, everything in the world, I hate to say this, really disturbs me to say this, but Al Gore is right. Al Gore is correct. That is to say that what happens in this world is really a result of the human being. I don't know if he's right in everything, but at least certainly in the sense of the human being being the source of that which occurs, we agree. We agree. It is the human being. I mean, certainly one can see it in nature, in the environment. There's no question that we've had huge impact. The hole in the ozone layer in the southern hemisphere, South America and Australia, resulting in the highest skin cancer rates in the world in those areas, and as a result of fluorocarbons and other human creations. So there's a classic example of the human action going up and then creating a reaction from upstairs. There, it's a very obvious physical example, but on a spiritual level, all this is also true. And so that's really how he understands. And with this, the Ramchal explains a very interesting question. He explains the idea of prayer. When you think of the idea of prayer, you start to think about it, even for a few seconds, you'll begin to realize there are some problematic aspects to it. What's problematic? Two problems. What am I? I'm telling God something. What am I informing Him that He didn't know before? I pray. I say, I need this. Health, wealth, security. Is that why He didn't know that you needed this? Oh, thanks for reminding. Didn't put it down. What? Why am I telling you something new? He knows what I need. He knows what I want, and He knows if it's good for me or not. And what's prayer do? On the contrary, if I ask for something and it's not good for me, and because I prayed, God says, okay, that's not good parenting. Is it? Imagine my 11-year-old, okay, my youngest is 11, okay, I don't have little kids. But I tell it, Ruffy says to me one night, he says, oh, but I don't want to brush my teeth tonight. I said, too bad, brush your teeth. Ruffy says, please, I don't want to brush my teeth tonight. I said, no, you have to brush your teeth. I just ate something, I want the taste to remain with me all night. I said, look, there is no way, right, I can't afford the dentist bills. You will brush your teeth tonight, right? So Ruffy says, just a second, Dad. Abba. He goes to his room, he comes back, he puts a jacket on, Tullis, right? takes a book, he says, Dad, Abba, please don't make me brush my teeth tonight. And he shockles and, that type of stuff, right? And I say, well, if you put it that way, fine. Forget it, skip the brushing. Is that good parenting? No. He's shockled, he puts on a hat and jacket, he uses a siddur. He asked me in Hebrew, Aramaic, what? So I say, fine, what? So what? How it works with God that way? God knows this is good for me. So I say, no, I don't think so. And he says, no, it's good for you. I say, so now I say that I don't think so. I say it very eloquently. I stretch out the syllables because that's an indication of real concentration, etc. And again, why is it? So the Ramchal understands prayer. And by the way, there is a huge amount of literature about it. I mean, it's not like the Ramchal's the only person who talks about this. Every Jewish philosopher speaks about this. Let's say for Ikrim of Yosef Albo, his approach is very, almost like a mechanistic approach. He says, yeah, sure. He says, you're not changing God's mind. What you're changing is yourself. If the kid comes to you, and I've been forcing him to brush his teeth 3 times a day, and he comes and he shows me that he's changed, and he's right because he's eating less candy, and he is not having, and he's not doing this, and he's not doing that, and he has less fruit juice, more water, etc. I'll say, you know what? Only 2 times a day, because he's changed. So Rav Yosef Albo, the Sefer Ikrim says, what changes in prayer is you change through the prayer. That's one possibility. The other possibilities, others say, is that yes, the parent wants the child to be independent. So ride the bike, you let go, let him ride the bike. And a good parent will let the child, not going to like have a webcam in the car, a webcam, like following him around, etc. No, look, satellite surveillance on the kids. No, you leave it. However, when the kid turns to you and says, please, I need your help now, then the parent will say, you know what, okay, help is now. So that's different ways of looking at it. But the Ramchal's understanding is the following. Inasmuch as the human being is created as a creator, as the initiator of everything, so he says, of course, God wants to bestow upon us that which is best for us. But he waits. What does he wait for? He waits for us to initiate it. How do we initiate it? Prayer. That's what prayer is. It's the first step. It's actually, and to him, probably the most central verse regarding prayer is a verse that we say in Ashrei, the very famous Psalm Ashrei. We say, Einei kolelecha yezaberu ve'ata noten lahem et ochlam be'ito. The eyes of all living things hope for you, and then you give them what they want. But it's only after the eye turns to God, that's when it happens. But until that time, it doesn't happen. And that's not. And by the way, it's not such an easy thing for the eye really to look towards God, because what we tend to do is, well, yes, I'm going to pray, but you know what? Obviously, the accountant's the one who's really, you know.
But you said we are the creator. If we are the creator, God has no role.
No. You know, I create the environment in which I live, and God responds. Because the world still needs God to sustain and to give blessing and to give life and all those other things. However, I create the correct environment for that. I create the opportunities for that. I have to initiate. it. To a great degree, you are right, to a certain degree, is that God does have, to a lot of time, it's hands off, because he wants the human to create the world. He wants us to create but he does intervene, and he intervenes at our request. But that intervention at our request, that outpouring of influence at our request, always has to be at our request. It's never his initiation of it. It has to come from us. It has to come from us. And there's an amazing, shocking verse just regarding prayer. I'm sorry, do you have a hand up? Yes.
Sometimes, like when you do your private prayers during the Amida, if there happened to be like a weekday when we're doing petitions, I was always taught that sometimes Hashem says yes, no, or maybe, or wait, or something like that.
Well, of course, there's different responses.
So the prayer is still effective in that you feel that you're connected to Hashem.
Of course you are. I'm not disagreeing with that. What I'm just saying is that the mechanism.
When God says no, you can't say that. I don't think you can say that prayer is like useless or something.
I'm not saying that at all. I don't think I implied that. What I'm saying is that the mechanism, the purpose, the way the prayer works is that the human being has to be the one to initiate whatever happens. Could be that it will not happen anyway, even if I initiate it, because God decided that it's not the right thing. That's true. However, even if it is the right thing, even if it is the appropriate thing, even if it is ideal, it won't happen until I begin the process and initiate it, because it has to start with me. That's all I'm saying, and that's the Ramchal saying. So, and there's an amazing and shocking example of this. The Jews sin at the golden calf. We worship the golden calf, as I'm sure you're all familiar with this. We do a lot of sins in the desert. We have the golden calf. We have the sin of the spies in the desert. Now, what happens is God comes along. Moses prays to God, and Moses beseeches God to not destroy the Jews. If you destroy them all at once, it will be a tremendous desecration of God's name. People will say, look, he took them out of Egypt, but he can't sustain them. He has all these pleas. And what does God say in the end of all that? God says this. Yeah, Moses prays to God at length. And he says, how could you kill all the people now? Don't do this, etc. So forgive the sin of this people. Forgive them. And you know what God answers? Vayomer Hashem, God says, Salachti kidvarecha, I've forgiven them according to your words. That's a strange expression. I've forgiven them according to your words. So the commentaries say, the Nachmanides, or Achaim, and others, they say this. God is actually subtly rebuking Moses. He's saying, I'm forgiving them only as much as you asked me to forgive them. As much as your words. Had you asked for more, I would have done more. But Moses didn't ask for complete forgiveness. Moses only asked that God should not destroy the Jews in one shot. So God says, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I won't do that. So I've forgiven them according to your words. But the implication of that is, had he asked for more? So that's the power of the human being. That to a certain degree, God says, it's in your hands. It's in your hands. Yeah.
There's an implication that if the bad people themselves had prayed, they probably wouldn't have had any influence. Because God only gave Moses what he asked for and gave the people nothing else. And they didn't know enough to pray.
Well, that is all you could infer is they didn't. We don't know if they prayed or they didn't pray. You cannot infer from that had they prayed, he wouldn't have given it to them. That's not a. You don't have sufficient evidence to infer that. You only have sufficient evidence to infer that they apparently didn't pray because there's no reference to their prayers. Whether had they prayed would have been effective, there's no evidence to infer that it would not. So that's not justified.
Is there an example of evil, bad people praying and the prayers being answered positively?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Esau, Ishmael, there's numerous examples. So anyway, so that's the idea here. That's one idea of the Ramchal, and it's very central to the way he looks at life, to the way he looks at us, that we actually create ourselves, we create our world, we create the environment. We don't only, God reacts to us, the angel, we send up the ladder, then the angel comes down the ladder, throne of God. That is all very, very classic and central to the Ramchal. Yeah.
How come then we say the leaf of a tree does not fall without God's wish?
That's not literally true. I don't think, that's actually a matter of question. Most of the Rishonim, medieval scholars, did not say that. But again, that you see, even if you want to accept that, a leaf is not a free will creature.
No, this means
a tree. No, it doesn't mean everything. No, that's not correct. It means a tree. A tree is not a free will being. Had it said a person doesn't lift their finger, that would be a different thing. It says it regarding a grass or a leaf because that is not a free will being. And even there, Maimonides and others say it's not so. These are just laws of physics which God put into the world, laws of nature, and that works that way. Right? But the power of human free will is quite powerful. And there are many different arguments about, but the extent of it, I'm not going to go into them, but can my free will affect other people? And indeed, according to the maximalist understanding of free will, yeah, sure it can, positively and negatively. The power of free will, quite amazing. Yeah.
What's the name of the book that you're...
It's called Da'at Tvunot. I think they translate it, yeah. It's translated as, gosh, how do they translate it? I think they translate it as the knowing heart.
And it's
in American, right? I believe so, yeah. Da'at Tvunot. Da'at Tvunot. I know there's an English translation. I think the translation is entitled "The Knowing Heart," isn't it? Is that right? Yeah, I think so. Okay, I'm sorry. Feldheim Publishers. Feldheim. Yeah. Now, a second idea of the Ramchal is the following. Second idea is the idea that, again, we spoke about who am I? What is the self? So he talks about this. When a child, in order to understand anything in any area of knowledge, you have to first of all have a framework in which to understand it, right? Example: if someone starts talking to me about a field in which I have no clue about any background, I have no background in the field whatsoever, it's meaningless to me. It's like they're speaking a foreign language. You know what I mean? Like I sit there with I learn with two guys who run hedge funds. Sometimes they get on the phone. In the middle, they're talking a foreign language. I have no idea what they're talking. It sounds like English, but financially I'm an incompetent. And so when I hear the tax arbitrage and we'll short the, I don't know what he's talking about. Right? So if you start talking to me about physics, right, I have a little grasp of that, but maybe you get into some really esoteric branch of physics, and I have no framework in which to understand. I don't know what you're talking about. So the same is true with everything. So in order to really accumulate knowledge, you've got to already have some knowledge. So you can't You can't put knowledge onto a completely empty background. You've got to have something, a framework in which to put it. As the verse says in Daniel, Yahiv chochmata l'chakimim. God gives wisdom to the wise. So you say, what do you mean? How do you get the wisdom in the first place? So that, the Ramchal addresses this. A baby learns lots of stuff. I mean, the learning curve of babies is incredible. They're just learning things all the time. But they don't have a framework in which to place it. So what? They see things. Some would argue that the baby can see. It's got the vision, the physical ability to see, but it doesn't see because it has no context in which to put anything. It just like it. So if I have no context, I see that everything is just blobs. It's like sometimes you're looking at these optical illusion things, and they show you a screen. You don't know what it is, and then suddenly you focus out, or right, you zoom out, and you say, "Oh, now I understand." But if the baby, where's the framework of reality in which the baby has that they can put things? So the Ramchal says, and obviously that this is important, to know this, because we'll see that it talks about how we are supposed to grow in general. So he says the framework is what he calls self. Self. The I or the ego, whatever you want to call it. Because the one thing the baby does know is me. I. And so when it learns things, it puts them into the framework and right, it relating to itself. Oh, that lady, get to know her, she gives me the milk. Right, she takes away the discomfort, right, etc. And that guy, yeah, whatever, and then it expands. So basically, the sense of everything is fitting into the framework of self. Of course, there are people who, throughout their entire lives, everything only fits into the framework of self. Right? It's all right. It's you know what I mean. Does the world revolve around me, or is it just me? Or as a friend of mine who writes poetry put it, even when, I forgot the exact words, but he says, even when I'm working on my humility, it's still all about me. But you see, we have so what happens is that expands. The sense of self expands. The baby's sense of self at the first is extremely limited. It's focused on the stomach. Nerve endings, that's it. That's the sense of self. It doesn't go beyond that. Then it gets a little older, so the baby's sense of self expands to include, also needs amusement, right? Needs recreation, play, toys. Then it needs companionship, and then it needs maybe intellect. At a certain point, the I has expanded, myself has expanded to include also the intellect. I need intellectual stimulation. It's not enough just to have a rattle. I'm not going to be interested in a rattle. I have to have something more advanced than that. So we buy ourselves a BlackBerry or whatever, right? So because it's not appropriate for someone my age to walk around with a rattle, so I have a BlackBerry, which is my toy, right? Or we get a really nice car, or whatever. That much, right? So our sense of self is expanded. That's my. So the self is expanding. Now it will also expand to include other people in that sense of self. The siblings, the parents, the siblings. The dog, etc., etc., etc. Now, so there's growth horizontal. You might call it horizontally in terms of the people I incorporate in my sense of self, and indeed when a person, let's say, someone gets married, so your sense of self expands to include your spouse. When I say I, married person says I mean we. It means we. Same thing. I want. When I say I want, it means my wife and I want. I want means my husband and I want, etc. I go to the car lease guy and I say I need an 8-seater minivan. He looks at me and he says, "No, I think you could probably fit into a 4-seater, Rabbi." I said, "What I mean by I don't mean my personal self needs an entire minivan. What I mean is my wife, my children. We need, that's what we need. I." So my sense of I has expanded. Someone a little more sensitive, when they say I or we, they mean the whole Jewish people. Even more so, you might mean all of reality, all of creation, everyone. So there's levels of expansion of that, levels of expansion of it into horizontally. Now there's also expansion. This you might call it vertically. right? Because we said the I begins with the sense of the soul, or the sense of rather just the nerve endings, the stomach, etc. But it gets more elevated. And so what happens is it's supposed to get more and more elevated until you get to the point where it includes also the sense of I and self is the soul and all the different levels of spirituality. That's also, when I say I need, does this mean I need a drink? Right? I need kiddush. Not just a drink, I need kiddush. I need this, I need that. So it goes higher and higher all the time. And so that's how the Ramchal says one of our purpose is really ultimately to grow. But to grow, so what happens is with the baby, there's arrested development. It stops at a certain point, right? It stops, some people it stops with the identification of self with the family. And beyond that, if you're not part of the family, I don't give a hoot about you. Okay? So that's where it stops. Doesn't incorporate friends, doesn't incorporate neighbours, doesn't incorporate the whole Jewish people, doesn't. Stops. And with some people, the sense of I, of the vertical growth also stops. It stops maybe at intellectual. It stops maybe at maybe some people stops at just recreation. Nothing that makes me think. God forbid. No, I saw a great bumper sticker. Someone's car, actually someone I know, right? His kid's car. The bumper sticker on the back, it says, "They can make me go to college, but they can't make me think." That's it. You know, I remember I was in. I spoke. I used to live in Toronto. I lived in Toronto for 4 years. So I used to give classes every now and again for the Jewish students at York University. York University is an extremely liberal, left-wing place. Also, there's a lot of anti-Semitism, anti-Israel stuff there. But anyway, so I was in the student centre, and there was a pamphlet there, which was put out by the university, by the college. And the pamphlet was about how to recognise or how to spot a dangerous cult. Now, cults were forbidden on campus. Cults. So how do you define a cult? What's a cult? How do you know someone's trying to missionise you into a cult? So there are a number of points they made. One of them was the following: if someone if someone challenges your beliefs, or tries to force you to critically examine your own beliefs, very likely this is a cult. I thought to myself, what the heck? Isn't that why you're in education? Is that not why you try to get educated? So you can actually criticise, so you can actually evaluate. What, I mean, I challenge your beliefs, that's a cult? That's what do you mean? I can't, so that's it? That's insane. That's insane. So at a certain point, I remember a friend of mine, Rabbi David Gottlieb, said he was giving a class in London, and during the class, a woman got out and walked out, but it was not just like some people just, they walk out, it's obvious they just need to leave or whatever, But sometimes people walk out in the sense that you say they're walking out, right? And she came to so he asked the person who was sitting at the front door. He said, "What did this woman say? What did this woman say when she walked out?" Well, she said, first of all, she demanded her money back. He says, okay. But what did she say? What did I say that she said, well, what she said to me was exactly the following: I came here to be educated, and I did not like what I was hearing. So Rogoli said, she came here to be educated, and in other words, education is only if you hear something which makes you feel good. Oh, it's all right. You're fantastic. Right? I didn't like what I was hearing, so that's not education. So that's unbelievable. So the Ramchal says the idea of growth is not just in width, but it's also in height. But the sense of self. So that's what we're supposed to do both ways. To incorporate everyone. It's a beautiful story. There were two rabbis, both very, very famous. You may have heard of them. In Israel in the 1920s and 30s. Two most famous rabbis in Israel. One was Rav Avraham Yitzchak HaKohen Kook. Rabbi Kook, who was the ideological head of the religious Zionists. And the other one was Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, who was the ideological head of the religious anti-Zionists. So they did not obviously see eye to eye. However, they had tremendous respect for each other. They disagreed vehemently on many things. And Rav Kook approached Rav Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld and said, would it not be a wonderful thing if the both of us would go around to all the new kibbutzim and settlements and little villages, which are mostly Jews who have no connection to Judaism, and let's talk to them. And Rav Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld immediately agreed. And the two of them, Rav Kook and Rav Sonnenfeld, the religious Zionist, the religious anti-Zionist, opponents in every way, went around Israel on a speaking tour to every little kibbutz they could find. Beautiful. And why did they feel that way? Because despite their disagreements, they felt, myself includes you and all these people. They came to a little place called Puria, still exists. It's near the Kinneret, I believe, near Tiberias, called Puria. And it was founded by Jews from Warsaw, I think. None of them were religious. They were all socialists, totally. And the dining room, all the food was definitely 100% not kosher. There was no kosher, nothing. So Rav Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld and Rav Kook came in, and they had them speak in the dining room. Everyone's sitting there eating the whatever they had, the bacon and cheese, I don't know, right? BLTs, and they spoke, and people just felt the love of Rav Sonnenfeld and Rav Kook. They just felt together with. They felt the self, the I had expanded to include these people, and their I had expanded to include them. And then after he finished speaking, Rav Kook was so inspired. He got up, he started singing a tune. It was a tune from Krakow, a traditional Jewish song, a nigun from Krakow, which they all recognize, and they all start singing it together. Rav Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld and Rav Kook, and these Jews from Warsaw, Krakow, from Poland, in Puria. And they're all singing together. And they get up, Rav Kook gets up and he starts dancing with them. And they're all dancing around the dining room together. And everyone was singing and crying. And at the end, they came over to Rav Kook and they say, could you please make our dining room and kitchen kosher? Amazing. But it was interesting. It was not a result of. It wasn't a result of Rav Kook, giving them slides with evidence of the Torah and archaeology. It was just they felt that this is we're part of you, you're part of us. We're all part of this one. We're all part of this one unit. So it's really what would be the highest level of this is the person feels that their self also includes God. Meaning, not that I see myself, but when I say I need, I want, I aspire to, what I mean by that is the totality of creation. I mean God. So it's interesting. There's a term which we say the following. You ever heard the term Mesirut Nefesh or Mesirus Nefesh? What does Mesirus Nefesh mean? Anyone translate that for me? What does Mesirus Nefesh mean? Mesirut Nefesh.
I don't know the exact.
In English, just give me a colloquial.
A spiritual contribution, sacrifice.
Self-sacrifice.
Self-sacrifice.
Self-sacrifice. To do something right. It's the Talmud talks about if a person is prepared to die for the sake of heaven, right? A Spanish Inquisition. What do we call that? Mesirut Nefesh. Right? So in the Shema, it says that B'chol nafshecha. You should serve God with all your heart. Love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your possessions. The Talmud says, what does it mean with all your soul? Even to the extent that you give up your soul for God. Mesirut Nefesh. Okay? So, one of the great Hasidic masters, the Shem Yishmuel, asks a very interesting question. He says, what do you mean? You're not giving up your soul. Giving up your body, if anything. Soul is fine. Well, Mesirut Nefesh literally means sacrifice of the soul. He says, when you do an act of Mesirut Nefesh, the last thing, you're not sacrificing your soul. The Jews in the Spanish Inquisition and the Crusades, etc., were they giving up their souls? They were sacrificing what?
Their body.
The body, not the soul.
That's Mesirat Guf.
Exactly. It should be called Mesirat Guf. It should be called giving up the body, not the soul. The soul is fine, on the contrary. Right? They're giving up their body to save their soul. So the whole terminology of Mesirut Nefesh doesn't make sense. You hear the question? It's like interesting. It's one of these questions which you've read this term and you may have heard this term. I've heard this term thousands of times, right? And the first time, and then I saw this Shemesh Shmuel talks about this. I saw it like 3 months ago, and I said, my gosh, yes. That makes no sense. His answer is that really the idea is that I consider myself as non-existent if I am divorced from God. I consider myself, so Mesirut Nefesh means I give over myself. The Nefesh is the self. I give over myself to God. It doesn't mean sacrifice my soul. It doesn't mean sacrifice my body. What it means is I give myself over totally to that reality, which is the ultimate reality, which is God. And that's really the idea. That's really the idea. So he says to work on that level where the person incorporates all of reality in their reality, and it's the expansion of the I to that degree. So now these two ideas come together a bit, because what he said before is that the whole essence of the human being is free will, but he also is saying the essence of the human being is the expansion of the, but obviously to expand the I and the identity and the feeling of self, to expand to include others, is of course done through your free will. But it's interesting that people ask the question, we have a command, love your neighbor as yourself. Leviticus 19, Vayikra 19, love your neighbor as yourself, I am God. So, doesn't that contradict self-love? What do you mean, how can you love someone as much as yourself? You have self-preservation, feeling of self, and halachically speaking, my life comes first. I don't have to give up my life for someone else. The two of us, we only have one canteen, God forbid, stuck in the desert. What's the halacha? Jewish law says, I can drink the can. I don't have to, I share it with him, we both die. My life comes first. I can't kill him to save myself, but I don't have to save him by killing myself. So how do you see love your neighbor as yourself? So Rav Shimon Shkop explains that and this is very much, he doesn't quote the Ramchal, but I think it fits in with Ramchal. Rav Shimon Shkop explains, he says it's not a contradiction. He says the idea is that yourself should include the other person. It's expanding the self to include others. And he says the person who is the crudest, lowest level of humanity, their self is very limited. Very limited. It's just limited to the nerve endings. That's it. Like the baby, like the infant. The person is a little more sophisticated. The self has expanded more and more and more. That is how he sees it. And this is what he calls avodat hayichud. That means yichud, striving for oneness. Striving for oneness. To incorporate all that into the self, and the self into all of that. So that's anyway, those are two ideas, just for two very brief ideas from the Ramchal, from his book Da'at Tfunot, and just to give you a little taste of some of the thinking of the Ramchal. I hope now people should be what I ideally wanted from this course is not to inspire you to go and visit Italy, even though that's not a bad idea, but I wanted to is that at least people should pick up a book of the Ramchal, right, annoy the heck out of Rabbi Serebrowski and Miller, have them teach it, learn it with you, right, do it over the phone, Skype, etc. But again, right, there's so much richness and depth in the works of the Ramchal. There's a little bit of a taste, and thank you very much for attending. I hope to see you all at the seminar and for the next course that we're doing here, whatever that will be. Thank you very much. Questions?